I've always thought Bob Dylan's greatest gift wasn't writing lyrics. It was writing lyrics that find you at exactly the right moment in time. Sometimes I'll hear a Dylan song and think, yeah, that's clever. And then 5 years later, I'll hear exactly the same lyric again, and suddenly it feels like he's writing about my own life. That's the strange thing about Dylan. The songs don't change, you do. A lyric that means nothing to you today might become the line you can't stop thinking about 10 years from now. So these aren't what I think are Bob Dylan's greatest lyrics. They're simply the three that found me when I needed them most. And the first one completely changed the way I think about success. When I paint my masterpiece. I've always been someone who loves having goals, something to chase, to look forward to aspire to. And for a long time, I carried around this quiet belief that once I reached whatever that goal happened to be, that everything else would somehow fall into place. Life would finally make sense now that I've achieved this lifelong goal. I'd finally feel settled. Then I hear Dylan sing, someday everything is going to be different when I paint my masterpiece. The first time I heard that line, I almost took it literally, and I probably agreed with it. But the older I got, the more irony I heard. Because I don't think Dylan believes that. In fact, I think he's gently laughing at the idea. The whole song is full of inconvenience. He's traveling, he's delayed, he's uncomfortable. Nothing is going according to plan. Yet he keeps returning to this almost childlike fantasy of when I paint my masterpiece, as though the masterpiece is going to fix anything. I think we've all done that. When I get the job, when I get the promotion, when I buy the house, when I find the right relationship, when I retire, then everything will be okay. Psychologists sometimes call this the arrival fallacy, the belief that happiness permanently lives on the other side of our next achievement. And what fascinates me is that Dylan seemed to capture the feeling decades before anyone gave it a name. Years later, Dylan himself reflected on the song in an interview and posed a simple question. Even if you do paint your masterpiece, what will you do then? That might be the whole point. The masterpiece was never supposed to save you. Life doesn't suddenly become smooth like a rhapsody. It keeps moving. The destination changes. The next masterpiece appears. The next mountain to climb is in front of you. And somehow that's comforting because maybe life was never about arriving. Maybe it was always about painting. Maggie's Farm. If Masterpiece changed how I think about ambition, well, Maggie's Farm completely changed how I think about power. Now, I know there are lots of interpretations of this song. Many people see it as Dylan rejecting the folk establishment, others hear it as a song about authority, and maybe both or either or neither are right, but that is the beauty of Bob Dylan's lyrics. We all have our personal experiences that make us unique, and the way we interpret art is unique. But over the years, I've started hearing something much more universal in these lyrics. I've stopped hearing Maggie's Farm as a farm. I hear it as a system. Any system, a workplace, a government, a school, a family, even your own inner critic. Once that idea clicked, the song completely changed and opened up for me because every character starts representing a different kind of pressure. You have Maggie herself, expectation. She tells you what your role is, what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to become. Then there's Maggie's brother. I've always heard him as surveillance, monitoring, the person constantly checking your work, keeping score, making sure you stay in line. Maggie's pa, the authority, intimidation, the force that reminds you there are consequences if you don't comply. And Maggie's mom might actually be the cleverest one here. She isn't threatening, she represents morality. The voice telling you that good people behave this way. This is what you're expected to do. This is what decent people do. And suddenly The farm isn't the place anymore, it's every structure that quietly tells you how to think, which makes Dylan's repeated refusal of "I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more" feel much bigger than quitting a job. It becomes an act of independence, a refusal to let somebody else define your life. That's why I still think it's one of Dylan's most liberating songs, because every one of us has a Maggie's farm in our life. The only question is, what does yours look like? It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. Of the three songs, this one probably means the most to me, because I've always struggled with nostalgia. I always hold on to places, to people, to versions of my life, to who I once was, even after they've long disappeared. Part of me has always believed that if I just remember hard enough, I could somehow stay in that point of time forever. Then I hear Dylan sing, "Leave your stepping stones behind. Strike another match, go start anew." And I realized I don't actually think the song is saying goodbye to anyone. I think it's about saying goodbye to yourself. Nobody really agrees who Baby Blue is. Some people think it's Joan Baez, some people think it's Dylan's audience, some think it's another musician, others think Dylan was talking to himself, and honestly, I don't think it matters, because I think all great songs eventually stop belonging to the writer, they start belonging to the listener. The line that always stops me is, "Take what you've gathered from coincidence. Not everything, just what matters. Take the lessons, take the memories, but don't carry the whole house with you, and then the carpet too is moving under you." I love that image. Life isn't standing still while you decide whether you're ready. It's already moving. Whether you move with it, that's your choice. My favorite line, though, is the vagabond who's rapping at your door. I've never heard that as another person. I've always imagined it as the future version of yourself, of who you could be, standing outside, knocking, waiting patiently for you to stop looking backwards long enough to let them in. That's what this song became for me. It's not a goodbye, it's an invitation to stop trying to preserve yesterday and start meeting tomorrow. I've never really believed there's a right way to interpret Bob Dylan. In fact, I think insisting there's only one meaning misses the point of his lyrics entirely, because songs don't just belong to the people who wrote them, they also belong to the people who need them. Maybe that's why Dylan's lyrics seem to change as we get older. The words stay exactly the same, but we don't. A song that meant nothing at 20 might become the most important thing you hear at 40. And maybe that's why I keep coming back to Dylan. Not because he always gives me answers, but because every few years, through the very same songs, he somehow asks me a completely different question.